Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's. Proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory, prices, and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I'm Evan Irwin, and we get started each Top 10 by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Hi, everybody.
Ruben Bressler.
Hi, how are you? You feeling better, buddy?
So much better. Modern medicine rules. I'm feeling way better. It was really bad.
Much better than vintage medicine.
Wow. And
it's good to have you back, though. Can I just say, the majority of the YouTube comments after we published the last episode was purely people in awe of the fact that you did that and just sort of your professionalism and your grace. And so I just want you to know that the fans appreciated you powering through that hashtag professionalism.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much.
And you also did great at the creators panel or the YouTubers panel. Mm-hmm. I was a big fan of all of the content that you made that weekend. So good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and it's one of those, like, you don't really want everybody to see you when you're sick. You just just kind of want to just crawl up and just be sick.
Yeah, you want to make a little nest of hotel blankets and pillows and stay in and watch Say Yes to the Dress all weekend. But just me? Was that just all right? A little bit too much about myself. I should save that for the pre-show. But Evan, actual hashtag professionalism. Say Yes to the panel.
There we go.
He was a good guy all weekend. So
yeah,
fantastic. All right. Well, that said, we are back, and we're going to make it happen here. We last spoke about our top 10 worst mythics. We begin with our choice from the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most luxuriant and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 worst mythics. Ruben?
Yeah, and this week's Honorable Mention comes from the Snapcast on YouTube, who writes, first sentence, all caps, with intermixing question marks and exclamation points. How dare you, Evan? You omit one of your calls on powerful mythic cards that'll warp standard, and we said nothing of it. You hyped us so hard on Warren Instigator that we believed it was the second coming of Goblins, but boy, did this card flop hard. The only Goblin worth playing was the common Goblin Bushwhacker, because it did at 2 mana what Instigator couldn't. And that was end games of Magic. What was even worse was the slow spoil of this card, as if it was going to be the defining Goblin that deserved to be the first Mythic Goblin to be printed in paper Magic.
Wow.
This being our top 10 Goblins episode, I think that Warren Instigator is a nice honorable mention to tie in our worst mythics to this week. So good job to the Snapcast.
Yeah, it didn't pan out. Like I said, you bet big, you lose big. And I kind of went all in. That's the kind of card that if you don't have the other Goblins, it's going to be bad.
It's not going to work.
Just like by default, it's like, and so when they didn't give you a Siege Gang or whatever in that format, and you're like, I need something, and it just didn't
Goblin
work.
Lackey in Legacy, obviously being the progenitor of this Warren Instigator, to be able to get 2 copies of that triggered effect. But Lackey obviously has the benefit of Ringleader and Siege Gang Commander and other good come-into-play effects on Goblins. Didn't pan out. Didn't pan out in Standard for that one.
So for those who don't know, Warren Instigator is 2 red for a 1/1 Mythic Goblin Berserker with Double Strike. And whenever it deals damage to an opponent, you may put a Goblin creature card from your hand onto the battlefield.
That thing.
And it's
Double Strike.
Yeah. So you could drop 2 Goblins, and I believe maybe at the tail end of this Standard, they did one of those things where you got Siege Gang and Warren Instigator in the
for
same
3
Standard
months.
format. Yeah, for 3 months.
That was like when they gave you Infect and Rancor in Standard for 3 months, or they gave you both Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves in Standard for 3 months. It was one of those deals.
Exactly, but it still didn't work.
It still didn't work even for those 3 months.
Just never came together, and those types of sort of Scourge-esque Goblin decks are long gone, and Warren Instigator is a fine choice for one of the worst mythics because it was. Maybe sad. All right, that said, it is time to talk about our top 10 Goblins. There was almost 400 of these freaking things.
Yeah, I actually had fun. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I had a lot of fun making this list. I remember, I think it was Ruben who suggested it, and you were the one who told me that there are Goblins in every color but whites. And I was pleasantly surprised going through Gatherer that we had some Gruul Goblins, we had some Rakdos Goblins, we had just had some pure black Goblins, some pure red Goblins. There were a lot to choose from, and I had a lot of fun making this list.
Yeah, it was super cool, kind of going back and be like, oh, that card, and I mean, I had, 30 options. I was this is some of my favorite weird cards. A lot of it was some of the art. Like I didn't, I got really close because some of the artworks are just absolutely amazing.
Flavor text.
Like
goblins have a disproportion. Goblins are just a fun creature type, and a lot of that is reflected in the flavor text.
Some of our most popular flavor texts, I think at least 2 or 3 of them were from goblins in the past as well. I really like goblins from a lore standpoint in that they look and feel and act different based on what plane they're on. Ravnica goblins are a lot more humanoid, a lot taller. They seem to have more strategy to them. Dominaria goblins we just had a bunch of with the reprinting of Warchief, and obviously we had a ton of them in Onslaught block. They're a little bit more squatter, stouter, more dwarvish like. And then you go to Ravnica, and they're a lot more pest-like, much more insect hovel kind of folks. And then you go to Lorwyn, and they're different there. So I just love the flavor of goblins and how different they are on the different planes of existence. It's very similar to how humans are different on different planes of existences, but sometimes we'll get caught up and be like, oh, merfolk are the same everywhere, right? Or elves are the same everywhere. Goblins, they could do the same, and it seems like Magic really embraces the various different kinds across all of the planes of Magic.
Elves are on Llanowar, and they're great, and they believe in peace and harmony. Let's go to Lorwyn where they're racist.
Where they're actual racist? Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
That was awkward.
That was a little awkward.
They kind of pushed Nissa in a new direction after a while. Let's not. Yeah. It got awkward. And one of the things I wanted to mention here, because this is one of my favorite little weird bits of trivia for Magic period, and I'm 100% sure this card is on neither of your all's lists, but Ember Mage Goblin from Scourge, I think it is, or no, Onslaught. From Onslaught it's not a very good card, and it doesn't even really matter. The point is the artwork. The artwork for this card by Pete Venters is super cool, but there's an Easter egg. If you get a foil copy of this card, Wizards got rid of, let's just call it an extra appendage, if you will.
Oh, that one.
It's got Goblin Wiener on it, and I'm telling you, it's a whole thing. And NSFW and Wizards cleared it off the non-foil, but they forgot to get rid of it on the foil. And by God, it's right there, just hanging out, literally. All right. Yeah, that was a thing. So with that said, we get to talk about our top 10. Ruben, what is your number 10 Goblin?
My number 10 Goblin is coming out again recently. It's going to be in Magic M19, Core Set M19, originally from the Return to Ravnica expansion. It's had a promotional foil, it's a popular cube card, and it's Gutter Snipe. So Gutter Snipe is 2 colorless and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Shaman, originally from, as I mentioned, Return to Ravnica. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Gutter Snipe deals 2 damage to each opponent. Just a super interesting card. It's sort of like a backup Storm win condition in Cube. I believe there was a Burn at the Stake combo deck for a little while in Standard with this and things like Krenko's Command, and I think you had Krenko's Command and Dragon Fodder in the same Standard. Either that or you had like Hordling Outburst or something like that. Alongside Gutter Snipe and Young Pyromancer to be able to just sort of explode on these big Burn at the Stakes to finish people off. I just really like Gutter Snipe. I think that it's an interesting design. It's not too powerful, but it's not underpowered either, and it's just a super unique card.
It's weird to think at this point, just to me, in period, that Return to Ravnica stuff is like old. It's like, it doesn't feel old to me, but you see all these printings in between: Commanders, Arch Enemy, Iconic Masters, all the way to Core Set. And with Core Set, it can kind of push into that blue-red spells archetype, where you just play cantrips and, sort of little tiny spells to gain a whole bunch of advantage, and that's perfect for that archetype.
Also makes a great insult if there's someone you don't like. You're like, get lost, you Gutter Snipe. Like, it's just great.
Ralph calls Vanellope a little Gutter Snipe in Wreck-It Ralph. And so people were altering Gutter Snipes with Vanellope onto them for a little while. This is also a promo card. You get this for top 8ing your game day, I think, with some new art as well. And so just a big fan of this card. Oh, this is from the Open House promo.
Aha.
Coming out soon.
So, Aaron, what's your number 10?
My number 10 is a shout out to my very dear friend Jen. A couple of years ago, my friend Jen became pregnant with her first baby, and it was fun watching her kind of navigate new motherhood, because this was her first. She certainly it wasn't planned. And, you have everyone kind of telling you what to do, and there's just this sort of creature growing inside of you. And she was just like, what do I do? She's like, there's this thing, and it kicks, and it eats, and it wants stuff, and I love it, but what do I do? What do I name it? How do I sleep? How do I do this? And at one point she was like, I'm just going to call it my number 10. I'm going to call my number 10. I'm just going to do that. And that nickname stuck throughout the entire pregnancy. And then after she had the baby, who's now named Max, she bought Max a print of Tuk Tuk the Explorer, which is my number 10, because for as long as she was pregnant, she just called the baby Tuk Tuk. She was like, Tuk Tuk wants pasta. And so that just became the name of her baby. So Tuk Tuk the Explorer is 2 in red. He's a 1/1 legendary creature goblin with haste. It says, when Tuk Tuk the Explorer is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a legendary 5/5 colorless goblin golem artifact creature token named Tuk Tuk the Returned onto the battlefield. And the way the flavor works is that Tuk Tuk was exploring one of the Eldrazi tombs, one of the Hedron tombs, and he triggered a rune trap and got killed. And then the magic sort of reconstructed him as this golem, and then he found his way back to his people and sort of just kind of started having fun and killing things, and that was that. But I just remember throughout Jen's pregnancy, she was like, yeah, Tuk Tuk's being really cranky today, and that just became the name of her baby. And then once Tuk Tuk was born, Max was born, she got a print of it, and it's still sitting in his room and framed, and he has a bunch of boxes to his name that if he ever decides to open when he's older, and that's just what I think of whenever I see Tuk Tuk. Wow,
that's a super cool card. I always really enjoyed the design of it, the 3-mana 1/1, please kill it, please sacrifice it for value or what have you, and it comes back. It kind of shows you what happens when Eldrazi takes things, it goes overpowered. Gets really dumb, and it's also one of those cards that had a sort of a mythic token. The token is very rare. It's worth over $1 just by itself, just as a token.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed this card. I played with this card in Standard, of course, because
of course you did.
Mono red guy. 3 mana for a 3/3, right? Usually is the going right. So when you started a 1/1, that's a little not great, but in this format, you almost always got the 5/5 after it died, and that was a tough thing to deal with. The only thing that really beat up on Tuk Tuk was the Vapor Snag, and which they couldn't really afford to save for the token because you could sort of maneuver the game state. I really enjoy Tuk Tuk quite a bit. Also great in the Birthing Pod decks that were popular at the time as well. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a really cool sort of bonus you have there. All right, so we'll go here to my number 10, which I like to feel like my number 10 slot is the slot I really get to sort of have fun with. I get to really just kind of, you know what, it's going to sneak in, it's going to be the last thing on the list. I have a huge list, what makes it and why. Plenty of cards I could have chosen. But this one in particular, the image is so much fun. Like, it's literally just fun. It's like, it's super cool. I love it. It all comes down into this little tongue, like sticking out of the mouth, like sometimes like animals do, and it's super dorbs. And in Time Spiral, this little dork showed up, and it's amazing because everybody but him charge. That's his flavor text on Ib Halfheart, Goblin Tactician.
It's a great one.
I love this little dork. He's a red and 3 generic mana for a 3/2 rare legendary Goblin Advisor. Whenever another goblin you control becomes blocked, sacrifice it. If you do, it deals 4 damage to each creature blocking it. Sacrifice 2 mountains, put 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens onto the battlefield. So it's an army in a can. You don't want to block anything that he makes, which is great. The flavor text is amazing. The image, Wayne Reynolds, it's absolutely classic. They haven't touched this image for a reason. It's perfect. I love it, and it's great. That's all.
Yeah, that's also a character we've seen in flavor text before, so it was really nice for that character to finally get a card.
Yeah, which a lot of some of those Time Spiral, like, check boxes or whatever, where, okay, let's see who so-and-so is. It's like, all right, sweet. Nor in the wearing.
Also featured in the very first duel decks, got Elves versus Goblins, so immortalized there as well. Yeah, Ib Halfheart is a great choice. One of my favorite first picks in Time Spiral Block Limited as well, as it's just an excellent build around.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on here to number 9. Ruben, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is one of several hires that I have. I was really hoping I was going to get to talk a lot about my favorite goblins, but I'll have to do so on other people's turns and respond at instant speed, as I have 5 hires.
Woo! That's a lot. That's almost half your list. Wait, that's half your list.
That is half my list.
That's 100% half your list. Aaron, what's your number 9?
Ruben touched on something really nice at the start of the show. He was talking about how a creature type can be different depending on what plane you're on. And I've really enjoyed over the last week or so kind of getting to know goblins and getting to see how they are on the different realms, and getting to see more of the studious goblins like the Izzet goblins, or getting to see more of the the rough and tumble the Gruul goblins that are more nature based and don't really deal with like technology and things like that. And but one of the types of goblins that I've really been a fan of, obviously, is in Lorwyn. We got introduced to the boggarts, and specifically the black version of goblins, and just sort of the way that they're very hedonistic, very mischievous, not really evil, but they're all about sort of the pleasure of life and experiencing that pain and that pleasure. And they're also surprisingly into necromancy and reincarnation, which you wouldn't think being goblins, and they're very willing to sort of kill their own because they know they're just going to come back, which we tend to see goblins kind of accidentally killing their own in cards, but this is the first time we've ever really seen them almost intentionally kind of killing their own. And I think no card really encompasses this more than my number 9, which is Mad Auntie, or Auntie. So Mad Auntie is 2 and a black. She's a creature goblin shaman, 2/2. Other goblin creatures you control get +1/+1, and you can tap her to regenerate another target goblin, which is something we don't usually see. The Aunties are sort of at the top of the hierarchy of the Lorwyn Boggarts, and also Aunties can be male or female, fun fact. But this is just something we don't really see before, and the flavor text specifically says 1 part cunning, 1 part wise, and many, many parts demented, which could imply that she's literally made up of different parts. And so seeing goblins kind of be into the idea of death and spirituality and this sort of dark take on them, I really, really appreciated.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the Mad Auntie, it has essentially the sunsetted keyword, if you will, of regeneration, because they wouldn't do that anymore. So if you could imagine if they remade this these days, it would be tap, target goblin becomes indestructible until end of turn.
Which doesn't have the same ring
tap
to it.
that goblin.
Yeah, which doesn't have the same ring to it, yeah.
As her, like,
Agreed.
bringing it back to life, giving you that kind of shell of, you'll be okay.
And you see that on... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, you see that on several of the Black Goblin cards, sort of them just sort of playing with parts and just sort of the... I really love that. I think it's a neat spin.
Yeah, and the idea essentially that, you know, again, the goblins are black on Lorwyn, which is really weird, and they work in a different way, and they have really weird spells and stuff. And back then, of course, there were tribal instants and sorceries, and we had tar fire, and all sorts of craziness was going on. So tribal blocks really needed all those pieces and parts to really hum. And when I got to go back and draft Lorwyn a few weeks ago, it was terrific to see how many triggers you could get between the changelings and the spells. They didn't really have that when you go back to Ixalan, and you're like, wow, I'm playing with these dinosaur things, but I couldn't really trigger all my dinosaur stuff all the time. I couldn't make all my dinosaur stuff cheaper because we don't have dinosaur spells like we have goblin spells, and that was really fun.
Yeah, the tribal super type. I'm not sure we have any of the tribal super type cards on here, but one of the cards that was on my short list was Boggart Shenanigans, which Sam Black wasn't always a super famous deck builder, and one of the ways that he became a super famous deck builder is he brewed up a Boggart Shenanigans deck that won him a car at Worlds. And so if you go look up Sam Black Boggart Shenanigans, go take a look at that deck list, because that is something else.
You've come a long way, baby.
Oh, yeah. Won himself a car, you know, as you do.
That's not a thing that happens all the time. Yeah.
You're lucky you can win a car payment now. Come
Correct.
on.
Well, it's weird. And that in particular, though, always cracks me up. Like, because if they give away a car, you have to pay the taxes on it.
Yeah.
So they're just like, congratulations, you're paying $2,000 to your local tax collector.
I think that he ended up taking the cash prize equivalent.
I think he took a payout.
But it sounds better to say that he won.
It sounds better when they move the curtain and the car's there and everyone's flipping out, and it's great. All right. So Ruben, no number 9 for you. Correct. We got a Mad Auntie over there. Well, it's time to get a little nuts, because we're still staying essentially in Lorwyn, but we're staying in Lorwyn when it gets flipped upside down.
It's weird. Sure.
That's right. You know. So take a little minute and sit right there. Tell you how it became the Murderous Redcap of Lorwyn.
Lord.
Because Murderous Redcap is fantastic. It is 100% pure value. It's freaky as all get. Look at how freaky that guy is with the nose and the stuff. This is hybrid mana. Shadowmoor was all about like monocolored, but monocolored with hybrid. It was really weird. So Murderous Redcap is 2 Rakdos mana, red/black, and 2 generic mana, so 4 mana total, for a 2/2 uncommon Goblin Assassin. Whenever it enters the battlefield, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player, which I think these days is any target. It also has Persist when this creature dies. If it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. So it dealt 2. It died somehow. It can deal 1 on the way back. If you can put a +1/+1 counter on it, it negates the -1/-1, so it gets to live another time. Involved in a ton of combos for that very reason, to just kind of loop through your deck or whatever, or loop through a chain of Murderous Redcap killing you instantly. And yeah, it was just a fantastic card. Ever since it showed up, it had infinite play in Standard until it left.
Yeah.
Malira, big part of that combo where it can't get a -1/-1 counter. That was something they probably didn't think of, in development or design. And do you know why they call them red caps?
Why is that?
Let's hear it.
Because they dye. I did this in my Goblin research, you guys. They dye their hats. They wear little hats. They dye them red with the blood of their enemies. Oh yeah, the red caps aren't messing around. They're here to kill you.
Wow.
Yep.
That's hardcore.
They're more evil than the black boggarts. The black boggarts
Yes.
aren't evil, but the red caps are certifiably evil.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, this is the first time a red cap has shown up in Magic, and being a D&D person, I know all about the red caps. They're basically like, if a vampire has to drink something's blood, the red cap has to keep dyeing its hat, basically. And so it has to kill something every couple days, or it'll go crazier, or it'll lose its facilities.
Is that a vampire thing?
No, the vampires have to keep drinking blood, or else the beast consumes them, right? Red caps have to keep dyeing their hat red with the blood of something that they've killed, because they're a cursed race. Which is super creepy and weird and gross. And when this guy showed up for the very first time, it was I was a little surprised that they would put something quite so dark and grim. I think that these did in fact show up in the Grimm fairy tales firstly.
Wow.
Very popular card, obviously. I think that this is the Goblin that was the closest to my personal top 10 list that was a non-mono red card. Spoiler alert. And this was, and because it had this hybrid mana that they borrowed from Ravnica block, whereas in Ravnica it was helping you build these monocolor or a multicolor decks, they borrowed it for Shadowmoor to help you build monocolor decks, which I thought was a really interesting use and change in how to use the hybrid mana. And so I've used red caps in mono red decks and in mono black decks, and of course in Birthing Pod decks and Revelark decks and all kinds of value decks, and I just love me a Murderous Red Cap.
I mean, drafting, if you get to play like one of those flashback drafts or whatever they do on Magic Online, if you get to play Shadowmoor drafting mono red in that format is just amazing. It's really, really good, actually.
Just first pick a Jaws of Stone and hope for the best.
Oh yes, as always. All right, moving on here to number 8. So I have a pretty good hankering and feeling that this is not the only version of what we're going to talk about, if that makes any sense. Because sometimes there's characters in Magic that are so big, they can't just get one card, and we're not just even Planeswalkers. We're talking about Legends. Sometimes they're small, and they're goblins, and they're super annoying, and they climb on the Weatherlight, and you're like, Squee the Immortal is my choice for the Squee I want on. Now, there's Goblin Nabob. I get it. It's fine. It's not that it's bad, and it's not that I wouldn't, say that that's not a great choice. I would say that Squee the Immortal has the perfect ability for Squee, and I love it. It's 2 red and a generic mana. It is a rare from Dominaria. It is a 2/1 legendary goblin, and you may cast Squee the Immortal from your graveyard or from exile. You can't get rid of Squee. Ixalan's Binding now actually does get rid of Squee forever, and that's good because that's kind of how the card's supposed to work. But and they had to update the rules for that, by the way. For a long time, you could just replay them again because whatever. But Squee is fan-freaking-tastic. I love, again, no matter how you kill him, no matter how you get rid of him, you just play him again. Squee never goes away, and that's awesome.
Shout out to my friend Allie Medwin. She was, I don't know to what degree she played a role in that card, but I know she was involved in the design of that card, and she got to kind of help spoil it or talked about it afterwards, and she's very proud of that card, and rightfully so. As
far as I'm aware, she designed that card whole cloth.
Okay.
And when I went to Grand Prix Seattle, this was before Dominaria was released, she had a Squee the Immortal Brawl deck that we played with. Nice. And she has the first Squee the Immortal opened in a pack of Dominaria as her Brawl General. And so Squee the Immortal Brawl Commander is the first Dominaria card that I ever held in my own 2 hands.
Awesome.
And just a great card. I made sure to include Squee in my board, the Weatherlight D&D thing, just because how resonant of a character Squee is throughout Magic history. They sing songs about Squee. You know, he's quite the character, and well deserving of a spot not only in the top 10 but in all of our hearts, of course.
Oh.
Beyonce did a song about Squee too. It was called "Squee, Myself, and I." Just
is that true? Is that a thing that happened? No. Oh, okay. I thought she was a big Goblins player.
You could totally just ran that straight, and we'd have both been like, "Yeah, wow, that's really crazy." Wow. Beyonce writes some strange songs, man. That's weird.
Beyonce goes 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, and the whole time is singing, "All right, now let's get in formation."
Wow. All right, Ruben, what's your number 8?
My number 8 is also higher on someone else's list. We had a lot of hive mind going on here with our goblins.
So much, but I think you get to talk about some cards here coming up.
Sure.
Which is good. Aaron, what's your number 8?
Again, keeping up with the trend of goblins doing different things or evolutions of goblins. You know, we talked about sort of the black goblins from Lorwyn, and now we're going to talk about a specific Gruul goblin and the ability to doing things that red or green don't typically get to do. And the thing that really sells this for me is I love the art, I love what the card does, but the flavor text, we talked about goblins having awesome and memorable flavor text, really sells it to me of just being this weird combination of like funny and creepy. My number 8 is Vexing Shusher. So Vexing Shusher is either 2 red or 2 green. It's 2 hybrid mana. It's a 2/2 Goblin Shaman. Vexing Shusher can't be countered, which is kind of unusual, but they've been kind of leading into that more, I feel like, with green specifically. And you can pay a hybrid mana of either red or green. Now, target spell can't be countered by spells or abilities. So it can't be countered itself, and it also makes sure that other things can't be countered. But the flavor text, it says, the stench of blood-cap mushrooms on the breath is enough to ward off even the most potent magics, especially when combined with the special chant, hush. And I'm just like, oh my god, it's just, I love it. I love that they sort of tell you why this thing is able to do that. It explains it's mostly due to the smell. I love the art. I love that it's doing things these colors aren't meant to do. It's just a home run for me. It's just fun to say too. Vexing Shusher. Shush. Shush.
Shush, 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 shush.
Shush, shush.
Yeah, I mean, between guttural response, which was a uncommon Gruul mana hybrid uncommon instant that countered target blue instant spell, and Vexing Shusher, it was like, look, we understand that Cryptic Command is a very good magic card, and that the red and green decks would like to play their spells now, and maybe this will help you, because this saw a ton of sideboard play. This card got lots and lots of play, lots and lots of love, and I think helped force quite a few spells through a lot of counter magic.
Yeah, really, this card shifted the shape and size of the counterbalance control decks back in the day. Before they became miracles, there were these 4-color mix-up decks that began specifically including Punishing Fire and Grove of the Burn Willows in their counterbalance Swords to Plowshares Lingering Souls deck to specifically deal with this card, mostly in particular. Because there were a lot of sort of Jund mid-range, and even the Goblin decks were using this to be able to force through some of their spells. The Goblin decks didn't really depend too heavily on this, specifically because their mana was pretty taken up the whole time. But certainly those more mid-rangey decks used a lot of Vexing Shusher in Legacy. Just a really solid card, and it knows what it wants to do.
Absolutely. All right, so we move on here to number 7. Ruben, what's your number 7?
I have a number 7, all right? Our long national nightmare is over. Ruben gets to talk about a goblin. I'm going to take you back to Pro Tour Venice 2003. A tournament dominated, in fact, by goblins. There were so many goblins in this top. There were 3 goblin decks in this top 8. I think
this
that
was
there were 3
onslaught
goblins
block
decks.
standard, essentially.
This was onslaught block constructed, yes. And the finals did also feature a Goblins deck in the hands of former Magic the Gathering professional and now current popular Finnish stand-up comedian Tommy Wallamies. Go look up his stand-up on YouTube. He's a very funny guy. He was playing Goblins, but he in fact lost the finals to Osip Lebedovich, Hall of Fame nominee, who also had 2 copies of this particular Goblin in his Astral Slide control deck. The Goblin, of course, being Gempalm Incinerator. So Gempalm Incinerator is 2 colorless and a red for a 2/1 Goblin. No job, just a Goblin. He's unemployed right now. He does have cycling of colorless and a red, And when you cycle Gem Palm Incinerator, you may have it deal X damage to target creature, where X is the number of goblins on the battlefield. So, big piece of the Goblins decks as a way to take care of troublesome creatures that have higher toughnesses that your 2/2s can't really attack through. You can cycle your Gem Palm Incinerator, especially if you're making a bunch of Goblin tokens, to get rid of a 5 toughness, 6 toughness, something like a Jareth Leonin Titan or something along those lines, to get them off the battlefield, or opposing, problematic 2/2s. If you need to get rid of like a first striker or something along those lines. Being able to impact the board state while also replacing itself and drawing a card is a big deal. And having cycling meant that Osip could take advantage of both Lightning Rift and Astral Slide with his Gem Palm Incinerator. Seen a bunch of reprints in the years since, originally in Legions, but having been reprinted in Elves versus Goblins dual decks and a couple other times since then. Just a great card, has some new art in the most recent versions, and just a huge staple in those Legacy Goblins and Old Block Goblins decks.
Yeah, this is a card that, I mean, if you think about it, essentially a 2-mana murder that draws a card, how awesome that card would be, and how much play that would see if you could just, kill it, draw a card over and over. I also love the artwork. The whole gem, burned into the palm thing is weird, but awesome.
He has a gem palm. Yeah, this is originally part of a cycle of other Gem Palm creatures. This is the one that saw the most play, but the other ones saw some play. The zombie one also saw a little bit of play as well, but certainly Goblins being the most popular and most potent tribe during that standard format and block format.
Yeah, Gem Palm.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say Gem Palm Polluter, I believe, is the black one, and I had it in my Balthor deck for a while.
And they all have their own very sort of specific tribal effects. Gem Palm Avenger, soldier creatures get +1/+1 to gain first strike. The Polluter, as you mentioned, the player loses 1 life for each zombie in play. That could it could be a huge swing, particularly in the mirror. Just thinking out loud. The Sorcerer did some of the Wizards. Who cares? Because the Wizards were terrible, and literally, it's bad. They all the Wizards gain flying. Who cares? Oh God. It doesn't kill something and draw a card now, does it? So and the elf one pumped an elf, which was nice. But Gem Palm Incinerator, clearly the winner there, which was awesome. Aaron, what's your number 7?
I've covered a Gruul Goblin, I've had a mono black Goblin, I've had a mono red Goblin with a twist. Now I'm going to talk about a Rakdos Goblin. This is a character that first made their debut in Conspiracy. They were a jailer, if you will. And then in Conspiracy 2, when Queen Marchesa took over, Marchesa fired him. At which point he became mono red and teamed up with Duretti and basically just kind of gave into the chaos, just gave into just sort of ransacking and pillaging, and he didn't really have a purpose anymore, which is, I guess, is signified by the lack of black, which is very interesting. But I love this card. I love what it does. My number 7 is Grenzo Dungeon Warden. So Grenzo is X, a black and a red. He's a legendary creature, Goblin Rogue, 2/2. Grenzo enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. You can pay 2 colorless and put the bottom card of your library into your graveyard. I'm in. I don't need any more than that. If it's a creature card with power less than or equal to Grenzo's power, put it onto the battlefield. And so this is really, really neat. I love the ability to kind of cheat things into play, which I love. I love that he's just sort of this giant, almost hunchback-like character, which is very unusual. Goblins are known for being kind of little, kind of tiny, and this is a big hulking goblin, very gray. You see the gray in his beard. But I love that when Marchesa comes and she's like, bye. And that's so sad because he should be able to keep his job. And he has a bit of a storyline with Silvala. Apparently Silvala was the first to kill Brago, and he freed her, and then she went and freed the constructs and ruined everything. But I love the flavor of this card. I love what he's able to do. I've been itching to build a commander deck of this, but I just can't find the right build, and Grenzo's my number 7.
I will say that a buddy of mine has a Grenzo Dungeon Warden EDH deck that uses Doomsday to put a Kiki Jiki and a Zealous Conscripts on the bottom of his library and kill people with that, which I think is quite adorable.
That's nice.
Make it like infinite mana somehow with your Cabal coffers or whatever.
Grenzo Doomsday Warden.
Yeah, basically. Yes. And another legendary goblin with multiple printings. Obviously, the Havoc Razor being in the first Conspiracy, and Grenzo Dungeon Warden making his return. Is it reversed?
Yeah,
Havoc Razor
is when he got
the second
fired.
one.
Yeah.
Oh, when he got fired. Well, that's why he doesn't have black in his cost anymore. But the dungeon warden, back when he was employed, I guess that makes more sense.
The goblin unemployment rates. We talked about that before. The other guy didn't have a job either. Like, what's up with that?
We need a goblin pension. We need to make sure that these guys are taken care of. You're in the
goblin
financial
left
It's tough to keep a job when you're a goblin, partially because racist, but also partially. Hey, look, goblins aren't, even in Dungeons and Dragons, goblins aren't exactly welcome in humanoid society. It's just something. It's not just a prejudice. They're not great at being employees because they're kind of wild and they're pretty evil. That's just a fact of life. So being able to hold down a dungeon warden job for even just a couple of months, that's a good idea. As you can see, he later became a havoc raiser. So, maybe there was some it was the correct decision to terminate his employment.
Nature or nurture, if you will,
right.
Ladies and gentlemen. Wow, I believe they included Grenzo Dungeon Warden. It was either in the Vintage Cube or the Legacy Cube.
Yeah.
As I got to play this in red-black aggro, and when you have all of your creatures being 2 or 3 power anyway, you can kind of start turning through your deck and see if you can get a hit off of it.
This card's insane. I mean, this is a 2/2 for 2, a 3/3 for 3, a 4/4 for 4, a 5/5 for 5, etc. up the chain in red-black, which you don't usually get Nessian Courser or 4/4 for 4 stats, like Rampaging Cyclops stats, in that color combination, in addition to being able to fill up your graveyard, maybe reanimate some stuff, put a Murderous Redcap into play if you're lucky, kind of deal. So yeah, definitely a good card.
Yeah, super good. Was reprinted in Masters 25 because Masters 25 was just full of $100 bills, and they wanted to put the cash in there. They really slip that in. But for my number 7, I like to think part of the way I was looking at it was I was like, man, sometimes these goblins just like literally just took over everything. They were better than everything at the time when they had the spotlight on them. And this was one of those from Onslaught. Onslaught block essentially said, we have these tribes. These all suck except zombies and goblins. And wizards is like a sick joke.
Good to me.
So bad they gave Kai this worldwide wrestling thing. It was bad. It was really bad. Yeah, the whole shebang. And but when they essentially picked the winners and losers. They gave all of the synergy and the right ways to the zombie decks and the goblin decks.
Yep.
And the star of that goblin deck, the one that would close it out, the one that you wanted to have your the one that gave them haste and +1/+1. That was what was that?
Haste and +1/+1 was Chieftain.
Chieftain, thank you. So when you had
War Chief made them cost less and
gave them haste. Okay, so War Chief, because it was War Chief again, was an onslaught block.
Yeah.
So you have your War Chief, you got your guys out ready to go. You drop a Goblin Pile Driver. And that card was insane. That card was nuts. And
yes, it was.
Protection from blue?
Yeah.
Why?
Whatever, because them wizards are going to gain flying.
That's why.
Them wizards are gaining flying, y'all. You got to do something about this. Goblin Pile Driver is a red and generic mana for a 1/2 rare goblin from Onslaught. It has protection from blue because reasons. And whenever Goblin Pile Driver attacks, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking goblin. Let me tell you, it doesn't take a lot of goblins to make this thing like a 9/2. And if you're dropping in multiples, and if they're cheaper, if one of the main things your lord did was make everything cheaper, and you're like, all right, pile driver, they both pump each other first of all, plus all the other goblins that are attacking. This thing was nuts. Like, this was the finisher.
Yeah, it was reprinted recently. I think it might have been in the same standard as like the dragon fodders, I think it was, and things like that.
Origins.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that it was in standard alongside Krenko's Command and Horning Outburst.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, I remember there being some awkward games of like, I remember kind of thinking the same thing of, how did this get so big? Like, how did this happen?
Yeah, unfortunately, there wasn't a good way to give it haste when it got reprinted in Origins. But I remember when they reprinted it in Origins, people were like, "Oh my god!" Remember the last thing that this thing was running wild over Bros in Standard? We got to solve this problem. I mean, it was so popular that they made a Judge foil out of it. yeah, this thing could deal a lot of damage very quickly. You could wrath a board of goblins, and then they play their 5th land, and they go War Tree, pile driver, and you're still dead, still taking double digits that turn. So yeah, definitely well worth
Art
the
is
slot.
great too. Just the goblin on a dude's head. Like again, just sort of doing what we think of goblins. Goblins are so small that they can sort of do that and just sort of literally just.
It was one of those things that giving haste is an incredibly powerful thing, and they made some new lords. I believe it was Magic 2010 or whatnot that gave them +1/+1 or whatever and some other ability. But haste and making them cheaper. Woo, that's pretty scary. All right, so we'll move on here, and also for Magic Origins, that also added Pile Driver to Modern, which people were like, oh snap, we're going to have a Goblin deck of it. No, we're not.
So, well, now we might,
bad.
because we haven't had a huge major tournament very recently, but now we have War Chief and Dominaria. We've got some other Goblin pieces. Obviously, we don't have Lackey, which is a huge part of the Legacy Goblins facet, and we also don't have Goblin Ringleader, which we might talk about these cards later, which is the big card advantage engine for Legacy. But you've got Aether Vial, you've got War Chief, you've got Siege Gang Commander, you've got this guy, you've got the pieces. I mean, it's possible.
People have been putzing around with it in Modern. They've been calling it Fecundity Goblins. I guess they call it Dirty Kitty.
It's more of a combo deck now with Fecundity to be able to take advantage
I
of
would play that. I wouldn't normally touch a Goblin deck, but I did watch a couple of games that Jim Davis was playing, and I was like, I would play this.
Yeah, Fecundity taking over the role of the Ringleader, being able to be the card advantage engine, for sure.
Nice. Well, there you go. Well, maybe you can actually get there one
Maybe
day.
it could get there. Maybe.
We'll see. We'll move on here to number 6. Ruben, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is not traditionally a goblin from the traditional capital G Goblins deck. However, it does have some good tournament pedigree. It has made an appearance, albeit in the sideboard, but as a 4 of a World Championship winning deck. We here at the Magic Mike's Top 10s have had some fun with Andre Quambra's Naya Lightsaber deck from the 09 World Championships. One of, if maybe the worst World Championship winning deck of the modern era.
It was bad. People don't even know. Good. It was bad.
And with only 11 red sources in this 3-color deck that included cards like Noble Hierarch in its mana base, you were going to have a hard time casting your Goblin Ruin Blasters. But boy howdy are we going to try. So Goblin Rune Blaster is 2 colorless and a red for a 2/1 Goblin with haste. But that's not the headliner. The headliner is Kicker of a Red Mana. And when Goblin Rune Blaster enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, destroy target non-basic land. This was essentially a return of Avalanche Riders to Standard. You were able to take care of a lot of the Jund lands on the other side of the battlefield, throwing their mana situation into a haywire experience, also being able to take out Oron Wraith, the Vast Woods on the other side of the board, other utility lands that you might run into, things like Celestial Colonnade, for example. And Goblin Rune Blaster was just a big piece of not only that deck, but it was also a major sideboard card at Pro Tour San Diego for the Jund decks as well. 2 of the top 8 competitors, Kyle Bogamus and Yoshihiko Ikawa, had these in their sideboard as well. Just a very good sideboard card. Made appearances in lots of other decks, including Boros Landfall. Just a really efficient way to handle lands that were problematic.
So I'm looking at the Naya Lightsaber deck list.
It's not, just stop looking at it.
I'm telling you, it's amazing because I know Mike Flores. I love Mike. It's great because he will hearken back. He will hearken to back because he designed this deck. Flores designed Naya Lightsaber. It's got 4 bolts, 4 paths, 4 Baneslayer, 4 Bloodbraid, a Scoot Mob, whatever. Some Planeswalker. Sure, it's just a weird heaping worth of mana base going on there. I'm not sure what's up with that.
Well, he had 4 Ranger of Eos to search out the 1 Scoot Mob. I'm okay with the 1 Scoot Mob.
Sure, it's fine.
That's not what offends me about the deck. What offends me more about the deck is the 4 untapped green sources total with your 4 Noble Hierarchs and the 11 total red sources to be able to kick your Rune Blasters. It's not good.
It's just the mana base is a hot mess.
Specific tournament. This was the solution equivalent. Those of you who are Zvi Moshowitz fans know the solution, capital T, capital S, was good for a tournament. Nile Lightsaber, very similar, good for a tournament.
This was the deck.
This was it.
This was the deck to kill Jund. This was your anti.
Yep.
Yeah, anti-Jund. Play your Baneslayers, play your Paths, play your Bolts, play your Ajani Vengeance. Just outvalue them because all of your spells have value. And it
didn't matter that your Wild Nacatls were usually 1/1s on turn 3 and didn't get to be 3/3s until later. It didn't matter because they were just efficient on turn 5 after you cast a Ranger of Eos to go search them up. That was hey, look, sometimes you need a very special sauce to win a tournament, and this was that.
Hashtag never forget they banned Wild Nacatl in Modern for a while. All right. 1 mana, whatever. Okay. Aaron, what's number 6?
You mentioned earlier in the show, Evan, about how Squee, they had to make a rules change for Squee the Immortal and Ixalan's Binding. And my number 6 also prompted a rules change because it interacted poorly, well, I thought it was poorly at least, with the Fuse cards. And so there was a good 6 months to a year there where people were playing these boom bust decks where you could cast it for free thanks to this card, which was awful. My number 6 is Goblin Dark Dwellers. So Goblin Dark Dwellers is 3 and 2 red. It's a 4/4 goblin with Menace, which is very relevant. Menace is just one of those keywords that people always forget. When Goblin Dark Dwellers enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card be put into your graveyard this turn, exile instead. So this was in standard along with a Brain in a Jar. And so the Saffron Olives of the world were starting to use the Fuse cards like Beck and Call, Boom Bust, and this would allow you to cast it for free. Getting all your lands taken away is freaking not fun. I was just like, are you serious? And that went on for a little while, and then they made a rules change, and they were like, that's enough of that, you little buggers, and they put them back in the closet. But for a while there, it didn't really pick up steam, but there were just those kids on the fringe that were like, I want free birds. Like, I want birds. We were also dealing with, like, the expertises, and that was a thing, and they were like, I'm going to get free stuff, and it was like, no. And so this was the card that really prompted them to change the rules, and thank God they did.
Yeah, I believe this was the first preview after I took over Gathering Magic. I believe that might have been it for this.
And this card itself never really saw that much play. Like, this was a card I really thought was going to see more play, and it just never did. It
does have a Pro Tour top 8 under its belt. One of the most fascinating Pro Tour top 8s of all time, Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. Later, Luis Salvato would, of course, win the Pro Tour with Lantern, but has a Pro Tour top 8 appearance with Boros Goggles. Do you remember this deck? With Pyromancer's Goggles and a bunch of garbage instants and sorceries and 2 copies of Dark Dwellers.
I played that with Sphinx's Tutelage and the Goggles, and so you would just draw a bunch of cards and mill your opponent out.
Right.
Oh, man. That sounds like fun. Now, this card in and of itself is a fantastic package. You're getting a free spell. It's Menace. It's a 5-mana 4/4. These are all good stats. This was the top end of a lot of decks in Standard for, there were Grixis control decks and Jund control decks. Basically all the 3-color control decks. There was also a blue-red Thing in the Ice deck that tried to use this as well because you could play another spell, take a counter off your thing, return your goblins to your hand. It was a little bit of a synergy there. You're right that Goblin Dark Dwellers was never the biggest thing in Standard, but being a 4/4 menace for 5, it was certainly one of the biggest goblins. Well, I gotta kick it old school, okay, for my number 6 here, because way back in the day, goblins were really bad, like super duper bad, and they got to see a little bit of play in what they call the slide decks or whatever. It's like, whoa, what? You're not like taking 12 turns to do anything. You're actually doing something on turn 1 through 3, which was weird back then because normally we didn't. We just drew cards and played lands and said go.
Yep.
And even further back in the day, and this actually happened after I had left and then came back or whatever. Damage on the stack showed up, and damage on the stack was always embarrassing. Actually never stopped being embarrassing. To explain to your opponent, I'm gonna hit you. That hit is suspended in midair magically, and then I'm gonna do something with this creature and it goes elsewhere, but it's still gonna hit you in the face. And this was the all-star of this was the all-star of damage on the stack. This was the one that you wanted on turn 1 because the Mog Fanatic was perfect for that. Mog Fanatic is 1 red for a common from Tempest. It is a 1/1, 1 red, 1/1 goblin. You sacrifice it, it deals 1 damage to any target. That's what it did. So, it could take out 2 toughness creatures by putting damage on the stack and then sacrifice itself to deal the other damage. That never made sense. Not ever once. But you always, got your opponent with it because they wouldn't understand the rules the right way. And finally, one day, Wizards was like, maybe we shouldn't have something that embarrassing in our game. And they got rid of it. So that's a good thing. Because in the end of the day, I mean, this was still a cool card. This card did see a bunch of play. It was reprinted a whole bunch of times. It's not been in standard for a real hot minute, mainly because once we got it back after damage on the stack went away, we're like, oh.
Well, we have Goblin Arsonist now, which is a triggered ability instead of an activated. I mean, not now, but since then.
Sure.
This was my number 9.
Nice.
Well deserving of recognition here. Obviously won the Pro Tour in the hands of Dave Price and the Dead Guy Red deck alongside fellow one-drop Goblin that I'm sure all of you are well aware of, Mog Conscripts. Probably not on anybody's top 10.
No.
But yeah, that lots of top 8s since then. Pro Tour New Orleans, Pro Tour Columbus in 2001 and 2004. Lots of history with this card. I, of course, played this mostly in a deck that I affectionately know as Bubble Hulk.
No.
Yeah.
Where your Protean Hulk would die because you played it with a Footsteps of the Goryo or a Shifting Hanger. And you would search your library after the Protean Hulk die. Out of its corpse would hatch a body double, which would copy the Protean Hulk, and a Viscera Seer or a zombie goblin. And then you'd sacrifice the body double and search out a Revelark and a Mog Conscripts, or a Mog Fanatic, a.k.a. Mog Fantastic.
Are we still comboing?
That was the first time I ever...
We're still comboing, and then you deal 1 damage over and over and over again.
That was the first time I ever experienced this card. I remember it from when I was a kid, but I remember seeing it in Modern, and that's one of those cards you have to go, is this Modern legal? Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. That's a thing. I'll never forget my favorite story involving Bubble Hulk is I was at a regionals one time, and there was a young man who was sitting to my left, and he was a fan of the show, and then he shows me his hand, and I see he's on Bubble Hulk, and I just start laughing. And his opponent's like, "What's so funny?" And I was like, Nothing. And the opponent's getting really upset. He's like, "Why is she laughing at me?" I was like, "I'm laughing because you're gonna die." And then when the Bubble Hulk thing is going on, just look on his face. He's like,
Mog's Conscripts. It just brings up that old This took like a decade and a half to get out of R&D. The idea that if you get a 1-mana 2-power creature, hell hath frozen over if you don't have a crazy drawback. It needs to be a jackal
pup. Yeah, it needs to not be good.
Yeah. Mog Conscripts was a 1-red 2/2 that cannot attack unless you played a creature spell this turn. Ooh, and it was bad. It was bad. That was like as good as it got. We were excited about that.
Yep.
That's awkward. All right. That said, we're moving here to number 5, which includes my one and only higher of the list. Oh. Ruben, what's number 5?
We just kicked it old school. All right. Let's bring it back to the present. All right. 28 copies in the top 8 of Pro Tour Dominaria. 2-8. That's a 2 and an 8 next to each other. Only one deck didn't have 4 copies of Goblin Chain Whirler in the top 8. There were 28 more copies of Goblin Chain Whirler in the top 8 than there were Forests in the top 8 of Pro Tour Dominaria. Red deck wins. All right, Goblin Chain Whirler is red for a 3/3. Beautiful. All those pips. Aaron, put the mountain up on the wall. Hang the mountain. Come on, let's do it. Creature type, Goblin Warrior. It's a 3/3 with first strike.
Oh God.
All right, for 3 mana. I'm already sold, okay? But just in case you needed more, the chains do in fact whirl, and when they do, when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and each planeswalker that player controls. It's just perfect. There's nothing better than a red. When people are like, this 3/3 for 3, it's too good. Maybe we should ban it. That's music to my ears. When I'm like, oh, red's too good in standard. I like where your head's at. I'm pleased with that. If you're conceding the fact that the red deck actually in fact wins.
This card is ridiculous. This card's
absurd.
Like, it went from, man, this is a really good card. Like, at least in I was reading, I was like, seems good, it's fine. To like, oh my god, there's 2 different people who guest starred in a review of it during this complete set review. To it's literally 40% of the metagame. If you're listening to this in the future, we are literally over here struggling with how to beat this stupid goblin. It has killed everything. It kept Llanowar elves out of standard.
Exactly right. It's taken care of. Glint Sleeve Siphoners have gone way down in popularity. Obviously, Champion of Wits, get out of here. All those 1 toughness mana idiots. It's kept Llanowar elves out of the top 8 of the format in which it was just reprinted in, a card that Wizards R&D thought was too powerful for too long. It started making appearances in Modern Goblins, as we've talked a little bit about recently, things alongside Goblin Grenade, being able to take care. I even saw a copy of it take care of some of my buddy Vitan and Grace's legacy creatures, being able to ping an unflipped Delver of Secrets on its way down. And so I'm a big fan of whirling those chains.
This card's not fair. It's just that we're in the realm of not fair. We're in like, wow, Wizards, I get it. You really don't want Llanowar elves to do anything in standard. We understand. Oh, it just hates on everything. It just anything with 1 toughness is just garbage right now. Like, it's actually just like, dies a chain whirler, next deck. I'm like, all right, fine. See how it is. Aaron, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is of sentimental value. A year and a half ago, I was at SCG Indianapolis with a bunch of friends, and my good friend Emma Handy was there. And Emma had a feature match, as she's wont to do, and I think she was on like Death's Shadow, or I think she was on Jund, or one of those things. One of those things where card types matter. And I'll never forget, she had a feature match, and she forgot to like take out one of her proxies. And so I'll never forget, and she catches it on camera, and you just see like the and for a while there, she had a picture of the card as her Twitter header, because she got a game loss for her. Like they had to go to the next game or something happened, but that card will haunt her for eternity. And I love her for it, and I'll never let her forget it. My number 5 is Tarfire. There's just a proxy Tarfire. Why? So Tarfire is 1 red. It's a tribal instant goblin. And it's just 2 damage. It deals 2 damage to target creature or player, which would not be any target. This is one of those weird kind of like Bitter Blossoms where they gave things that weren't creature types.
Right.
So this is an instant that's a goblin. And you see this sometimes with the Tarmogoyf decks, because the tribal does count as a thing that counts toward Tarmogoyf's power and toughness. For Delirium, this is also another thing that counts if you're into that sort of thing.
You'll see a copy in Grixis Death Shadow decks, or the 4-color Death Shadow decks that use Traverse the Ulvenwald.
Yeah, and so this is a card that sometimes sees play, and it's just adorable when it does, where you're like, really, girl, really? But it's a thing, and it talks a little bit about sort of there's the lore of the auntie in the flavor text, but I'll just never be able to look at this card without thinking of Emma and watching her feature match, and she's a pro, she's Emma, she's polished, and it's like, girl.
There's the Tarfire. It's just
the proxy Tarfire.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I liked Tribal. I enjoyed the idea that the spells could get more flavor, because it's weird where you draw the line, and that seemed to be their biggest problem. It's like, well, where do we stop? And I'm like, who cares? Go nuts.
Yeah.
What are our feelings hurt here? Like, because it was cool to be able to, get a goblin card back from your graveyard to get back Tarfire. That was awesome. Yep. That felt great to play a goblin.
Cast Ringleader and reveal a Tarfire to get a burn spell into your hand. That was awesome. I really liked the theory behind Tribal. Obviously, these days, the biggest impact that the Tribal super type has is that it grows your Tarmogoyfs and makes your Traverse the Ulvenwalds easier to cast, or to get the biggest effect out of, I should say.
Sure.
Otherwise, just a shock. But shock is good enough when it has those other beneficial effects. I'm a big fan as well.
I miss Tribal. Tribal's cool. Yeah. Moving here to number 4. Ruben, what's your number 4?
Well, as you know, I have 5 hires.
Oh, no.
And so mathematically speaking, all of my cards until number 1 are higher. My 4, my 3, and my 2 are all higher.
Oh, man.
My 9, my 8, my 4, my 3, and my 2.
It's you and I, Evan.
Wow. We're going to carry this one home.
Well, I'll reply at instant speed. Don't do that.
Whatever.
You'll reply with creature-type goblin.
Yeah, nice. I will. Yeah, Tarfire's an instant. I can do that.
I have to ask you, though, did you wear your red shirt because we're talking about goblins tonight?
Sure. Let's say I did. Let's say I thought that far ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, he did. Aaron.
That's right. That's professional podcast.
What's your number 4?
So I love Dredge, as we all know and love, as we all know. And in modern, Dredge hadn't really found its footing for a long time. And before Grave Troll was unbanned and subsequently rebanned, the version of Dredge that people were playing was known as Lone Pox. You were using a card called Zombie Infestation, and you were pitching your dredgers and making zombies. And some of the things you would pitch would be Life from the Loam, you'd pitch a Lingering Souls, but you would pitch things that you could get value from after you pitched them. You would play, Raven's Cry, but it didn't really matter what you were pitching. And my number 4 was a very important card in this deck because you could pitch it and then just get it back again. And so this was just sort of, you always made sure you had cards in your hand, and so you were always able to make zombies or a few of your Conflagrates or whatever. And so you had mentioned, Evan, the newer iteration of this card, and this is sort of my favorite, is the older version. Number 4 is Squee Goblin the Bob, and I have hard cast a Squee. I am not too proud to hard cast in the Bob, just saying. So Squee Goblin the Bob is 2 and a red. It's a 1/1 legendary creature goblin. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may return Squee Goblin the Bob from your graveyard to your hand. And so if you're always just pitching them and you're faithless looting them, you don't mind pitching them. And this also sometimes works with Bazaar of Baghdad. You see people in Vintage trying to do like a Bazaar control deck with this card in there. Instead of pitching things you want to keep, you just pitch this and you'll just get it back again. And so you're manipulating, the card advantage thing. The thing that would normally be a drawback isn't a drawback when you're running Squee. And so I love this card. It's a lot of fun. I love this particular artwork of it. It just looks very still serious, but still fun at the same time. It's hugging his toy, and I just have a great appreciation for this card. And this is a card that everybody always has to read. No one knows what it does, and I have entered combat with Squeeze before, and it's just great. Sure.
I mean, in my cube, I have absolutely seen Squee pick up a new Umazawa Jete and just go.
Or just stand in front of your opponent's 6/6 every turn.
Sure.
Like, I'm not too proud to do that. This was really popular in the Survival of the Fittest, like, mid-range control decks that I was chomping on at Grand Prix Chicago in 2009. I played against Michael Jacob, the Darkest Mage, and he had Squee Goblin Nabob that he was discarding to go get something new every turn with survivals, and Squee has definitely been a popular card in all of those decks. I do believe it's Nabob.
Nabob, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna tell me Shaman?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Are we shaman it?
It's a creature type shaman.
Okay.
Nabob, Dominaria, Nevada. And so potato. In any case,
fast is the wrong syllable. We got it.
Yeah. He became a leader of the goblins in Mercadia. As we were discussing, the goblins all over the place are slightly different, and they were sort of a union, a labor force in Mercadia, and Squee sort of became the leader of them and saved the whole Weatherlight through political intrigue while they were there. Spoiler alert for the Mercadian Masks storyline, which was a really fun book. I really actually enjoyed that particular novel, even though that it didn't really make a ton of sense.
I know that political intrigue and magic, they just go hand in hand. Yeah.
They do. It's like Star Wars. You just love all that political Trade Federation intrigue. Boy, that's exciting television.
Trade routes.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's the old history of Squee Goblin Nabob.
General Tongarth roared. General Nuisance, maybe. Yeah. All right.
Got him.
So my number 4, we have spoken of at least once or twice so far. This to me is one of the quintessential goblins. This is one of the most important goblins to ever see print. This is in my top 5 because there is no conversation that starts with goblins and overpowered that doesn't include Goblin Lackey. It just doesn't. It's just a card so incredibly powerful. It was an uncommon in Urza Saga.
Why?
Yeah.
Because who knows power levels?
There wasn't anything to do with it in Urza Saga.
Yeah, everything was so broken in spell-wise. Who cares if you get free goblins? Nothing matters. It's ridiculous. Goblin Lackey is a 1 red mana 1/1. Uncommon from Urza's Saga. It is, of course, a goblin. Whenever Goblin Lackey successfully, well, at least that's what it reads, whenever Goblin Lackey deals damage to a player, you may put a goblin permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. That's the latest and greatest text. Because this card is bananas. You get to literally bypass mana costs, and that was more or less the theme of the Urza block. is who cares about mana cost anyway, right? Those things just get in the way. Why can't we just pay nothing for all these awesome spells? Isn't that better? Don't we just give you mana like hand over fist so you can go do things with it? Or just go play free spells? Because now, literally every goblin that gets printed in the history of Magic ever gets to go, well, if I put it in play on turn 2 thanks to Goblin Lackey, what happens? Like, literally till the end of time, we get to have those conversations. That to me is powerful.
Rare in Vintage Masters, and I love the flavor text from Vintage Masters. It got some updated art too. It says, at the first sign of enemy scouts, Jula grinned and strapped on his diplomacy helmet.
Nice. Well, Vintage Masters being an online-only set, so there was From the Vault Exiled, which is where the new art came from, which is fine too.
Right, and it was printed in From the Vault Exiled because it was banned in Old Extended, alongside, get these names, Entomb and Frantic Search. All right, Goblin Lackey alongside those two. That's something else.
Oh man, that card is ridiculous. But that moves us into our top 3 here. Aaron, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is a little lady, and yes, she's a lady, who immediately upon her release, shortly after, I want to say, proceeded to dominate games of Commander, specifically 1v1 Commander, ultimately leading to her banning. Do you know you have to get banned in 1v1 Commander? I mean, you got to be pretty dang broken. I have occasionally seen her in Legacy. I've never really seen her in Vintage or anything, but it's not hard to see why this card was banned. My number 3 is Vial Smasher the Fifth. Honey. So Vial Smasher is 1, a black and a red. She's a legendary creature, Goblin Berserker, 2/3, with partner, which means you can have 2 commanders if both of them have partner. Whenever you cast your first spell each turn, Vial Smasher the Fierce deals damage equals to that spell's converted mana cost to an opponent chosen at random. When you're playing 1v1, there's only one choice. When you're playing multiplayer, you can sort of choose who you want to do your damage to, and unless somebody's doing something really broken, you're probably not going to pick on them, or unless you're just a jerk. But with 1v1, you've only got really one target. And so when you pair this with something like Crom, Ludovic's Opus was the target or the partner that was really problematic, it just gets really out of hand. And there was the dominance, similar to what we've seen with Baral, where the metagame was very skewed to Vial Smasher decks, eventually did the right thing and banned her. And she's banned in Dual Commander. I believe Dual and 1v1 are different. But she's banned in both, and it's not easy. It's not hard to see why when you're playing just even. This is just one of those cards that even when you're just going about your business, like even if you're not trying to do dumb things, just casting spells, like it's kind of like Landfall, where just existing does things, and it just adds up after a while, and it's very, very scary.
Just like Tarmogoyf, where you just have to play Magic, and it's great. And that's fine. You don't choose an opponent at random is awesome, except when there's only one, and then it's always them. So that's terrific.
Yeah, it's really interesting that, of course, the Dominaria Oracle updated basically everything that has an ability that deals damage but doesn't have a target. There was one exception, and it was Vial Smasher the Fierce.
Wow.
It is an extremely powerful effect and an extremely powerful card, as we referenced already.
Well, if we're going to talk about power, okay, we're going to talk about cards that are so busted that they got themselves banned. That there are cards that, like, the power level on this stupid card is so crazy high. You read it and you go, what? Did this say there's no restriction to what I'm doing here? Because we're talking about we're back in Visions, okay? They had no idea what they were doing. They had no idea. And Goblin Recruiter showed up. And this card is broken. This card is just snap it like a Slim Jim. This thing is busted. I can't even begin to tell you. Listen to this. It's a red and a generic man for a 1/1 Goblin. Okay, whatever. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for any number of Goblin cards and reveal them. Shuffle your library and put them on top of it in any order. You could stack your whole deck. You could stack your whole deck with Goblin Recruiter. It's crazy. For 2 mana. This thing is banned in Legacy. Yeah, and it is just a goblin. Who cares? Whatever. It's just goblins. It don't matter. Oh my god. This card is amazing. And it's just straight busted. It is as busted as they get.
Card is absolutely ridiculous. There is, I mean, to put in perspective how ridiculous this is, there is a card called Dwarven Recruiter that has occasionally seen Fringe Legacy play, even though there just like aren't any dwarves. Like now there are about 60. But for a while there weren't any before Kaladesh block. There was like 20 dwarves. And people were still like, this effect is so powerful that I can stack the whole top of my library. Let alone if there's 500 different goblins in an archetype that is already good enough. You've got things like Recruiter, which would literally let you draw 4 cards with this card. Yeah, being banned in Legacy is a big deal, and this is the only goblin that is. So.
Yeah. Very unique, older style of art done by Scott Kirshner, which is very unique to him. He did a number of slivers. He's also done things like Bone Dancer and Basalt Golem. This very, dare I say, almost tribal looking. You see a lot of masks. You see a lot of, almost emaciated characters. Very primitive. And I love the art of this card specifically.
Yeah, these look a lot more like the Batiri goblins that are native to Chult. And I think that there's...
Come on, etymology.
I guess one of them... Oh, they aren't standing on top of each other like the Batiri do, but they're sort of like all hanging on each other in this art as well.
I mean, Scott Kirshner has illustrated some of the oldest Magic cards, all the way from back in Tempest and all the way from back to Legends. Axelrod Gunnarsson, for example, was him, which is great. You might know Forbid was probably his most famous card. That he got to do. And Illicit Auction is the one with the elephant on the stand. I love that. I think it's absolutely beautiful. So that's really sweet. And again, Goblin Recruiter's broken. All right, so we're going to move on here to number 2. Ruben still doesn't have one.
I have some things to talk about apparently soon. Jeez.
I guess so. Aaron, what's your number 2?
4 hires still.
If you would have told me that this card would have seen Standard play, Modern play, Legacy play, Vintage play, I would have told you lost your damn mind. I myself have played this in Vintage. It was in the deck I played my first night ever on VSL. I wanted to throw people for a loop, and so I showed up with Dragon Stompy, which was running 4 copies of this card. I still can't believe it. Dominance, 4 formats. What? How many goblins can say that? My number 2 is Goblin Rabblemaster. So Goblin Rabblemaster is 2 in a red. It's a 2/2 creature goblin warrior. Other goblin creatures you control attack each turn if able. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 red goblin creature token with haste onto the battlefield. Whenever Goblin Rabblemaster attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking goblin. This gets out of hand so fast. This is another one of those cards where you're like, how did it get so big? And this is something that Modern Jund has sometimes run as a creature. This is something that the mono-red prison decks love. You'd be surprised just cheating this on turn 1. Here you go. I've killed people with this in formats like Legacy and Vintage, where Moxen are legal, where Terminus is legal. These powerful cards, and sometimes just getting a turn 1 Rabblemaster can win the game, can close out the game. This saw Standard play. This has seen Modern play, Legacy, Vintage. It's just unreal. Like, and I would have never guessed. Like, if you had told me that this would be a multi-format all-star, I would have never believed you. But it is. It has. It's holding tight at around $5 per card, depending on where you go. And it just gets out of hand so quickly. The art, shout out to Svetlin Velinov. There was even a promo of it, but the original is just so good. You see the goblins sort of push to the forefront, and then you look behind him, and there's so much going on. And I just can't say enough about this card. And who would have thought?
I believe this card wins in 4 turns. Is that right?
By itself?
By itself.
So it goes 1, and then 5. Wait.
It goes
1, 6.
Yeah. He's counting.
Then plus 8. 14 to 15. So, 4 turns by itself.
4 turns by itself. So, turn 1, you have a 4-turn. I win in 4 turns. I hope you can deal with it. This card was very close to my list in all sorts of ways. This is one of those that I think more or less snuck up on people. It could be a snick. But, it was one of those like, yeah, it's good. It's fine. And then all of a sudden somebody played it and they're like, wait a minute, that card is an unstoppable monster. And then other people played it in older formats, and it continued to be an unstoppable force that has to be reckoned with. And it's awesome.
This one was my number 4. Obviously won the Pro Tour in the hands of Martin Dang with the Gruul deck wins. Also really popular in a lot of Jeskai Tokens decks, lots of burn decks, good backup plan for the burn decks as well. Yeah, definitely a great card.
All right. So moving here to my number 2, which again has to be somewhere on Ruben's list because he has a million cards. But it's weird when cards can be so lauded that they show up, but when they show up, it's fine. And then, again, over time, it's just one of those, again, Goblin Recruiter wasn't broken when it showed up in Visions or whatever. It got broken because they kept making broken, silly, crazy stuff. And so it doesn't really take much. Combinations in Magic are volatile. Combinations of A effect plus B effect equals, oh my god. Sometimes it's A effect plus B effect equal in the game. And oftentimes, that's exactly what happens with my buddy from Champions of Kamigawa, Kiki Jiki. Mirror Breaker. This card is bananas. It does silly, crazy stuff. They've reprinted it from the vault. They've put it in Modern Masters 3 times. They've put it in Masters sets. That's how silly, stupid, powerful this card is. Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker is 3 red and 2 generic mana for a 2/2 mythic legendary goblin shaman. Haste. Tap colon. Yep. Create a token that's a copy of target non-legendary creature you control. That token has haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So anything like a Pestermite, anything that can untap a permanent, means you basically auto-win if they don't have a fog effect, or if they can't end the turn, or if they can't stop you from attacking, or whatever. Yep. That's just how it works. So Kiki Jiki, having been reprinted this many times, at one point I think got up to $50-$60 before they finally started reprinting it. And now it's gotten to that point where it'd be like, Wizards, could you stop reprinting it because it's getting weird? We get it. It's like a $10 mythic now. You've done it enough. You can stop. Can we have Noble Hierarch, please? That'd be pretty sweet. I'd like to see some of those that aren't $50 bills. But Kiki Jiki itself is an amazing goblin. Super cool. I loved it, and I'll just never forget standing outside of the pre-release and this was Betrayers of Kamigawa, and somebody's like, I'm never going to play with this stupid card. You want it? Don't you use it in your cube? And they gave me a foil Kiki Jiki just for hanging out. Here you go. What ended up being, $80, $100 card or something these days? It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, this was my number 3.
Nice.
Obviously has won 2 different modern Pro Tours in Twin Exarch decks. It's also a popular piece in some of those Birthing Pod and Court of Calling decks in the past as well. Being able to go infinite with Restoration Angel, Zealous Conscript, Deceiver Exarch, Pestermite. It's just a spectacularly good card. Fantastic. And again, put it in my top 3. So we were right there.
We were right there. But it's time to turn the corner to number 1, numero uno. Oh, man. Ruben, what's your number 1?
Well, I have somehow my number 9 is one of your number 1s, which I like a lot, and of course my number 2 also. But my number 1, I think, has the largest pedigree. It's just the most wide open. It has been reprinted, I think, 7, maybe 8 times. All the way back originally in Scourge. It got reprinted in 10th edition. It was in Magic 2010, and of course, most recently, printed in Dominaria. Does not have a Pro Tour top 8 or Pro Tour win under its belt just yet, but it does have that pedigree from all the way back to the Goblin bidding decks, Red-White Vengeant, aka Boat Brew decks, Green-Red Snow decks, Jund, all over the place. You will have seen the Siege Gang Commander. 3 colorless, red gets you a 2/2 Goblin. When Siege Gang Commander enters the battlefield, create 3 1/1 red Goblin creature tokens. Pay a colorless and a red and sacrifice a Goblin. Siege Gang Commander deals 2 damage to any target. Ready, fire is the new flavor text, which I really like. This was the cover art Goblin for the Elves versus Goblins dual decks, which is one of the most iconic of all time. Obviously, it has won a Pro Tour in the hands of Simon Gertzen at Pro Tour San Diego in 2010. Lots of Pro Tour top 8s under its belt. Lots of format and Grand Prix top 8s under its belt. Almost won Grand Prix Columbus, the Flash Hulk GP, except for Steve Sadin defeated Owen Turtenwald in the final of that event when Owen was playing Goblins. And yeah, I mean, just all over the place, all throughout Magic history. Very easily my top slotted Goblin.
Wow. Well, this was my number 5 because Siege Gang is a force to be reckoned with. It brings it's an army in a can. It's
the original army in a can. Yeah. It inspired the Cloud Goat Rangers. It inspired the Beetleback Chiefs of the world. And yeah.
Yeah, because it brought its own force. It was 5 mana, essentially, 5 power, 5 toughness for 5 mana, split across all these bodies. Had that incredible sacrifice ability. This was a card that's a monster bomb and limited.
Absolutely,
easily.
It's probably the best. It's probably the best rare in Dominaria for limited. There are mythics that are probably better, but I think that Siege Gang is top 10 cards and probably the rare I want to open the most.
I want Helm of the Host more than I want Siege Gang Commander personally, because that card is ridiculous.
To each their own.
Guys. You can just put a Helm of the Host
on a Siege Gang Commander. There we go.
Portrait Los Dominaria, yo.
Wow, see, that's what I'm talking about. We're all about bringing people together. This show, all about bringing the love together for Siege Gang, because it's hard to say too many good things about it. It literally, every time it shows up, it's great. Every time it shows up, it seems to do something, or it's a part of sort of the thinking of the metagame of like, wow, if you're playing red, you could just play Siege Gang, right? You could just throw down 4 bodies and then be able to toss literally all of them, including itself, to deal 2 damage, which is amazing. That said, Aaron, what's your number 1?
My number 1 is a card that I am surprised Ruben did not have on his list, because I'm sure he's used this card before.
It's on my list.
Somewhere.
It's on my list. It's either at number 2 or number 9.
Okay. All right.
Both of your number 1s are on my list.
Well, I'm hoping this is on his list, because I'm sure he's used this card before. This is a card that it looks simple enough. You read the text and you're like, got it. And then they activate it and you use it and you're like, and you realize just all the things it's capable of. When you realize all the combinations of things you can do with it, it just blows your mind. And then you find yourself rereading it like, my number 1 is Goblin Welder.
Nice.
So Goblin Welder is 1 red. It's a creature type Goblin Artificier, 1/1. You tap it, choose target artifact a player controls, and target artifact card in that player's graveyard. If both targets are still legal as this ability resolves, that player simultaneously sacrifices the artifact and returns the artifact card to the battlefield. So you basically swap artifacts. This is ideal for the Painter Servant decks if you want to get a happier combo. You have that smarty pants opponent who thoughts uses you, and you're like, that's nice, girl, I'll just sacrifice this Lotus Petal and get it back. Or if you're not able to assemble the combo, you pack your deck with things like Wormcoil Engine, and you sacrifice your Mox Opal, and bam, here's a Wormcoil Engine, here's a Mere Battlesphere. You read that little text and you're like, all right, to get a couple artifacts, it's fine. And then you're like, oh.
So,
and you realize just how out of hand it gets, and it's very, very powerful.
Ruben, don't tell us which one is which, because I'll be honest, I could see either of these being either the cards that are left, because I obviously know what his number 2 or number 9 or number 8 rather happens to be. I don't know, and I can literally see arguments for both positions now. Because that's really fascinating. Because Goblin Welder, in and of itself, is stupidly powerful.
This card is powerful.
Not even remotely fair. This is, again, we're in Urza's block, right? Who cares about a mana cost? Mana costs are so stupid. I hate mana costs. They don't raid things
Monty. It also helps them in Vintage. It helps them sometimes assemble a lot of the 2-card Monty decks have a backup Painter Servant plan. So sometimes you can just find your Helm Obedience and be like, whoop! And just
I love me a Goblin Welder. This is, of course, on my list. I'll save it for, I'll let you guys try to decide whether it's my number 2 or my number 8. Really popular in the Utility Belt deck from Pro Tour New York 1999 that Dave Humphreys and Rob Doherty both took to the top 8 there. That was sort of a blue-white tinker deck, being able to get out Phyrexian processors and swap them with your wall of junk or whatever. And, of course, Rickard Osterberg won Pro Tour New Orleans in 2003 with the affectionately named George W. Bosch mono red. Well, not really mono red. It was red blue also, but a lot more focused on the is almost mono brown, honestly, with things like Grim Monolith and Mind Slavers and Voltaic Keys to get that big mana stuff going.
It was a simpler time, which
it was.
Deck names were stupid. And
deck names were stupid, but they were adorable.
Yeah, when we entered the world of video coverage, we had to kind of put foot down on the stupid deck name thing.
On deck names like George W. Bosch. Yeah, right. I agree with that.
And your Fruity Pebbles and your Dirty Kitties, and just be like, can we just be like Goblin Combo or whatever you are?
Right.
Can you just be red, white, blue control or something?
This was blue, red, Tinker.
Blue-red Tinker.
Both of those decks were honestly
Flavor text is funny. The Goblin basically saying, I wrecked your robot, but here's an ashtray.
cover star of the Elves versus Inventors that just came out as the last dual decks.
All right, so it's tough finding out what's number one. It's tough saying what my number one goblin of all time happens to be. Because what makes the greatest goblin? What makes the best goblin? What makes the number one goblin? What makes my favorite goblin? You know, it was cool. One of the things that's been most fascinating to me about sort of my opportunities at making the Magic Show, the things I could do in the 2000s as I kind of came up in the world and whatnot, and having a relationship of somewhat with R&D has been one of the most fulfilling ways for me to experience and love Magic, because I like to see what they're thinking. You know, that to me is really interesting. And I was talking to Mike Turian, and Mike developed, as I recall, Zendikar and Worldwake, and there was definitely a point in time in which I just went like, Mike, what are you doing? What is happening in our life right now? And it was so much fun, because a lot of times he would just say to me like, but it's fun, right? Like he actually just kept me like, but it's fun. And I'm like, right. Yes, it is fun to play with very powerful, some would say almost broken things. And this one also brought the, Mike, what are we doing here? What are we doing in our lives right here? Because, man, there's nothing in this world that is sweeter, or more fun to me at least, than the triple Goblin Guide draw. Because it is so powerful. Goblin Guide is nuts, and showed up in Zendikar. Is still a $20 card right now. It is one red for a 2/2 rare Goblin Scout that has haste, and whenever it attacks, defending player reveals the top card of their library. If it's a land card, that player puts it into their hand. That is a 1 mana 2/2 haste with a small drawback.
Yeah, it's it's only a drawback like 40% of the time.
Yeah, 40% of the time it works every time.
And sometimes in its advantage, because then you get to know what your opponent's drawing or playing. Like, oh, you revealed Mana Leak? That's good to know.
Yeah,
right?
That's excellent to know, because if you play turn 1 Goblin Guide go, turn 2 next mountain, 2 more Goblin Guides.
They're dead.
I've never lost a game that way. I'm
not sure anyone's ever lost a game that way.
I mean, it's the opener that it has an impact on you, where like you go to sit down and you're like, okay, I'll play a little bit of Modern Day. It's gonna be fun. Good luck, have fun. And then you see it, you're like, Mountain Guide. It's like,
oh yeah.
Oh no.
Even if your opponent has the Pyroclasm, they're still at 12. Like,
yeah, it does a ton of damage really quickly. And this one was like, Mike, what is happening with Goblin Guide? He's like, but it's fun. I'm like, yes, I am having a lot of fun with this card. Yeah. Not always my opponents, but I'm okay with that.
Right.
So
you got the Boros aggro. You got the Boros aggro decks. You got the Burn decks, 2 of which made the top 8 of Pro Tour Fate Reforged, in the hands of soon-to-be Hall of Famer Li Shi Chan and the Manimal Seth Manfield. You've got Paul Rietzel getting second place with Boros Landfall, Tribal Zoo, Death's Shadow Zoo, Bushwhacker, all of these super aggro decks. You just can't beat a 2/2 with haste with even just a minimal drawback.
Aggro.
Nabob.
Shamion. All right.
Archipelago. Sorry.
So that was our top 10 goblins. You'll see them.
I'm not even going to tell the people which one was which.
Well, no,
you decide.
Have to. You have to, because I'll show it on the screen.
Okay, well, let's take some gambles. Who thinks Goblin Welder is my number 2?
He said gamble. That's a card.
That's a goblin.
Who thinks Welder is my number 2? Raise your hand.
I'm going to say you had it at 9.
8.
Who thinks you think Guide was my number 2?
I think Guide was your number 2.
Yeah, Guide was my number 8. I had Welder at 2. Because they both had promo printings. They're both in the cube. Welder won a Pro Tour. That's where I drew the line.
You do love a painter's servant, so.
Wow.
Also true.
I literally had put it in the spreadsheet. Like, I'd already made up my mind. Welder's number 8. Yob.
Oh, when Guide wins a Pro Tour, we can have this argument again. But
no more. No.
As yet. And Welder has a soft spot in my heart because there's his legacy. You guys know my love of Urza's legacy. It's got to be up there.
Yeah.
I reckon. Well, that's again. These are part of the arguments of like, yeah, I can see it. He's going to say it's Welder, and it's fine. But I'm like, Goblin Guide is like the goblin I think of when I think of like powerful, good goblins.
I know.
Which is crazy. But that ends our top 10 goblins for real this time. You'll see them on the screen now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite.
We got some good ones still out there, folks.
Oh,
all right,
so
I want to hear
yeah.
them. We
So
talked
many.
about Warren Instigator this week already, so I'm not sure that it's going to make the top 10 Goblins list, so maybe go a little bit deeper, but there are some good ones still out there.
Oh, man. There absolutely are, but we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
It's good to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. It's great to be back. Not from a Patriarch's bidding this time, but, you know.
Different. It's different.
Not a Goblin bidding. Just a return from the grave in a different way.
Wow. Move here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching or listening, and hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Visit our website at magicmicspodcast.com, or follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv at Magic Mics, on Twitter at Magic Mics Cast, our Magic Mics subreddit, and like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week. Same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.